Well, I'm happy to be here with Scott Greenberg. My name is Dave Greenberg. He might be a brother from another mother. We just don't know. But we certainly have a lot of things in common in terms of our philosophies and our spirits. So I wanted to introduce Scott Greenberg, who has a lot to say. He was a very successful franchisee. He is a speaker of renowned qualities, and he's written a book that just really caught my attention. The Wealthy Franchisee. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Great. Scott, would you share a little bit of your background to introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. So for more than 10 years, I was a multi-unit franchisee with edible arrangements here in Los Angeles. For about 13 years prior to that, I was a full-time motivational speaker and had a lot of presentations about leadership, but I hadn't actually done much of it. So when I got into franchising, the idea was to still be a speaker, but to get some more real world experience, to have another stream of income and a place to kind of experiment and try out these concepts and see which ones are legitimate and which ones are ridiculous. And there was definitely both. So I did that for 10 years while still speaking. And we did very well. We won some awards and made money while I had the stores and made money in the back end. Started getting invitations to speak to other franchise brands, to their franchisees about what they can do to build a top performing business. And so I sold the stores a few years back, and I'm back now to full-time speaking. Probably about 75% of my audiences are franchises. So a typical day of work is, I fly to a city and I go to a franchise conference and they have me keynote and maybe do breakout sessions or moderate a panel. But everything is about helping franchise business owners take their business to the next level.
That's excellent. That's excellent, Scott. This is kind of where we're similar a bit. I am also a multi-unit franchise owner, and I essentially help corporate executives escape and create their own wealth. That's what we did, my wife and I and some partners, with our 6 franchises that we now own spread across 3 different states. And in my role today, I help people live that dream. The one thing it's
interesting that you use the word escape, because I think that people don't really get into franchising. They escape to franchising. Usually they're getting out of something, something makes them say, you know what, I do not want to work for them. I now want to work for myself. So most people have a story of how they kind of backed into it.
Right. Flexibility, freedom, time to be your own boss, all that good stuff. I got tired of building shareholder value for other people and finally figured out we could do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
If my grandfather was still alive, he said I took too long to do it. The one thing I really enjoyed in your book was the wealth creation equation, because so many people forget about the components of wealth. And I really enjoyed how you captured it. Can you share that with us?
Sure. In the book, I described there are 3 characteristics of being a wealthy franchisee. Obviously, the word wealthy is there as a hook because I want people to buy the book. But if the book was called, just The Happy Franchisee, I don't think anybody would buy it. Certainly, your brand is fantastic, empowered franchise. That's meaningful. But the way I define wealth, being a wealthy franchisee, is 3 things. First is obviously that people are making good money. That's relative to their investment and also where they live. But relative to the time they put in, to the money put in, they're getting a good financial return on that investment. But you might have 2 franchisees. Let's say they're taking home, $200,000 a year. One of them is doing it working 20 hours a week, and the other is doing it working 80 hours a week. They're hardly having the same experience. Their profit and loss statement does not reflect all the time they invested in the business. So the second of the 3 criteria is that wealthy franchisees are in control of their time. They're not slaves to the business. From running, all of your businesses that you still only have 24 hours in a day, just like someone only has 1. But the idea is to, maximize the return on your time investment and still be able to travel or go out to eat and have a life. So you're making good money, you're in control of your time. And the third one is quality of life, that your life should be better. You should be experiencing peace and balance and joy, and having a great franchise business can help you do that. So throughout the book, I interviewed lots of people who are achieving all 3 of those things. So it's absolutely possible, but you have to be deliberate about it. And that's the entire goal of the book and of all the work that I do, is to help franchise business owners achieve all 3 of those things. That's, to me, what it means to be wealthy.
That's awesome. I do send your book to every one of my candidates at a particular point in my process. because it's inspiring. And it's inspiring in many ways. And if you think about why you actually became a franchisee in the first place, what were the key motivators for you?
I really love the work that I was doing and still do as a professional speaker, but it involves a lot of traveling. And at that stage of my life, my wife and I were starting our family. So I didn't want to completely get away from speaking, but I wanted to kind of dial back the traveling, which meant I needed another stream of income. And at the time, I didn't have a specific idea for a business, but I saw an airline magazine ad for edible arrangements. And I thought it looked cool. The concept was great. We really didn't have much of that represented in Los Angeles. So I thought, wow, this is a great way for me to, like, instead of having to innovate, I can just execute. They'll teach me the system. I thought it would do well here in LA, and I thought it would actually be great for my speaking business. So part of it was wanting to add to what I was doing. So like what I was doing, I wanted to do it less. I didn't have an idea for my own business. So I thought, great, I'll just buy the idea from them and have that collaboration that you get. And the way I looked at it, you pay a royalty, you pay a one-time flat franchise fee, which isn't that much given everything they give you. And then you pay this royalty, which you get back in, so many more ways with the ongoing marketing and the ongoing help and support and brainstorming and all that. So I thought it was an inexpensive way to be able to get into my own business and to do something collaborative and to actually try out the concepts that I talked about on stage. So there are a number of reasons there that made a lot of sense. And if I could go back and do it again, I absolutely would have done it. I probably would have done it sooner and probably even at a larger scale.
Now, you had a successful exit. Congratulations. And now you're really enjoying some things that truly were the fruits of your labor, no pun intended, with edible arrangements.
That was nice.
But as you worked through that, you discovered some things that made you successful. And you obviously have talked a lot about the things that have made franchisees successful in your book. But the one thing I'd like to dig into a bit, you talk about the wealthy franchisee mindset, and I just love that. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts on what a successful wealthy franchisee mindset means?
Sure. So not only are there three criteria that define what it means to be a wealthy franchisee, there are also three factors that impact the results that we get when we run these businesses. First is everything circumstantial, like the economy, the competition, labor laws, government, the weather, things we don't control. Second factor is the operations. That's what we're paying the franchisor to teach us, the process for sales and marketing and how to deliver the specific products and services. And most people get into franchising thinking, well, okay, they'll teach me the system, so I'm just going to work really hard. So the belief is strategy plus sweat equals success. But in a franchise system, you see that that's not true because you see a lot of people sticking to the same system, working just as hard, but getting very different results. And the reason is because I discovered a third factor, which I contend is the biggest differentiator between typical franchisees and wealthy franchisees, and that's everything human. It's what every franchisee brings to their business, their intrapersonal skills, which is how they think and manage emotions, and then their interpersonal skills, which is the way they cultivate relationships with the franchisor, customers, certainly their employees, and other franchisees. So that mindset piece is absolutely critical. The wealthy franchisee mindset is characterized not necessarily with a positive attitude. These people are not especially positive. They're not negative. They're clear. They make decisions not based on optimism, but based on data. And I think that's a really important decision because a lot of people make very irresponsible decisions because they have a positive, optimistic, glass always full kind of mentality. That's not always good for business. You can make some irresponsible decisions that way. So they're really good they feel their emotions, but they keep them in control. They clear their head. So that clarity is one part of the wealthy franchisee mindset. Another thing is a commitment to continuous improvement. Even when they're the best, they want to outdo themselves and get better. They don't stop because they know as soon as you kind of get complacent, you slide backwards. So part of the wealthy franchisee mindset is that commitment to continuous improvement. They stick to the system. None of these great people who I've met over the years are interested in innovation or creativity. They pay a royalty for that. They've outsourced that. They rather just execute. So they trust the franchisor, knowing the franchisor isn't perfect. They're going to make their mistakes. But if they make a few mistakes with the franchisor but support their innovation, they can align themselves with all the great, smart things their franchisor is doing. So they cultivate great relationship with the franchisor. They keep a clear head. They're very aware of their emotions. They stick to the proven system. And the last thing I'll say about the mindset, and again, I could go on and on. I was about to say I could write a book about it, but I did. The last thing is they're very deliberate, their mindset about how they invest their time. As I said, we only have 24 hours in the day. You can spend that marketing and getting out in the community and coaching your employees, or you could spend it doing all the cooking and sweeping and cleaning and doing the work yourself, and then not put as much time into the things that grow your business. So I found that these people, what enables them to become multi-unit franchisees like you, is they lead and operate at a higher level, bringing out the best in others. And they focus on the big things and they outsource the smaller tasks to everyone else. So they can make sure the business grows, they can make sure they can expand and scale it and still have a life. So those are all characteristics of mindset. And you can see how two people can both market and both sell and both stock shelves, but they can do it in very different ways based on what their mindset is. So wealthy franchisees, they have that work ethic. They work hard, but they infuse the work and the strategy with that mindset. And that's why they execute operations at a higher level. And that's why they do better in the same set of circumstances.
That's thank you very much. My candidates, I essentially help people find the right fit for a franchise opportunity that really ties to their skill sets and the characteristics they're looking for in their business investments. And most of them come to me well-versed on leading teams and developing people. That's what they love to do, right? It's interesting to see how they make these transitions from usually managing maybe a fairly educated workforce to managing educated but an hourly workforce, which might be a little different of equation. And I'm excited to hear you're writing a new book on how to manage the hourly workers. Could you touch a little bit on what you're building in that new book and maybe share your thoughts on really some key things to lead teams in the franchise world?
Okay. So if you're asking me if I want to promote the new book, gosh, why would I want to do that? But since you asked, yeah, I'd be happy to. So, because I had all those histories of motivational speaker, I've read all the books and I've gone to seminars, that kind of thing. And I've been exposed to so much of the content and all the resources out there about leadership. But when I actually had an opportunity to do it myself with, lower skill, lower wage workers, they weren't responding to things like me telling them there's no I in team and talking about these abstract concepts like, purpose and mission and values. And they're like, their eyes are glazing over, right? If I say there's no I in team, to them, that's a comment about spelling. So much of that sort of higher level stuff that you hear all the time in the corporate world, it didn't translate to hourly workers. And so what I have set out to do is to really kind of crack that nut, to crack that code, to figure out what makes hourly workers different from those earning a salary, and how can we wrap the way we manage them in a way that is appropriate for them. So that's what the whole new book is about. And it's important to understand the differences. Someone who's a salaried worker, they probably bring a higher skill set, probably a higher level of commitment. They're getting more compensation. There's probably benefits. In their mind, they're thinking they're going to be there longer. This is, a big thing. And they might come with more education, maybe fewer family problems, that kind of thing. What the data shows is that hourly workers, they're getting paid less. They don't stay as long. Their lives are more in flux. And they're treated in a way where it's more transactional, that they're sort of thought of more as, sort of units as workers, as opposed to, these really important people. There's more of a revolving door, which means those managing hourly workers have to spend that much more time recruiting and working harder to retain them. So it's important that we understand hourly workers, how they're different. We can't expect them to act like they have as much commitment to the business, because we don't have as much commitment to them. If we did, we'd be paying them more, but we can't because the business model doesn't allow it. So it's a very different population. We have to change our expectations, change our approach, find other ways to motivate them. But I will tell you this, the one thing that is not going to work in the long term for hourly workers and to sustain them is to throw money at the problem. Which is, certainly after the pandemic, as, people have wanted their workers to come back and everyone's complaining that no one wants to work. Well, it's that no one wants to get worked. No one wants to, there's a lot of reasons why people left. It's not just because they wanted to sit home and collect government money. That money has stopped, but there are more options now. There's, they can drive rideshare, they can do, DoorDash. There's a whole gig economy. They have more options. There's more people fishing in the same pond, more employers, so they have choices. So what my book is about is how to be an employer of choice, how to understand what really motivates them, focusing not just on what the employee gets, but how the employee feels. How can we appeal to their soft needs as well as their hard needs? And so really understand what is the emotional needs, what gives them a sense of pride, what gives them a sense of commitment. So I'm in the middle of writing that book right now. I'm really excited about it, interviewing a lot of people. I'm profiling a number of really great businesses that aren't complaining about their hourly workers, that don't have problems with recruiting and retention. They're out there, I'm talking to them, and I'm codifying their process for really succeeding with that population. So that's what the next book's about.
That's excellent. I mean, we are blessed in our 6 locations and our franchises because we have great retention. It's funny, the internet password in all my businesses is happy place. It just sets the mindset. But I think it takes me back to something that I took away from reading your book, which was talking about culture and how important culture is. And maybe if you could break it down in 2 ways, if this works. One, how does it impact the franchise system? But more importantly, as a franchisee, what can you do to set culture to impact your business?
Great question. So first, I think it's important to define culture. And let's begin by defining what culture isn't. Culture is not paying people well or giving them things or treating them well. Those things are nice, but that's not culture. Culture, in the new book, I sort of distinguish team building from culture building. Team building is about assembling people together and creating a bond. And then you just looking at people's skill set, and then you wrap your operation, you wrap your objectives around the individual skills. In an hourly work environment, is one of the points that I make, is that the people are constantly changing. Well, culture is what goes on between the people, even as the people come and go. I went to UCLA in the late 80s, early 90s. My nephew goes to UCLA now. He rushed a fraternity that was there when I was there, and back then was known as a party house. Today, it's still a party house. The people have changed, but the culture has remained. So culture is the way people interact. It is their social norms. It is their ways of doing things. So the idea is to want to establish how people communicate, how they're greeted, what are our rituals for onboarding employees into the business, and what are our rituals when they exit. It's all that stuff that even as people come and go, what are our ways of doing things? And so the way I define what culture is, it's a shared set of beliefs and shared rituals. So it's a common way of thinking and a common way of behaving. If you think about, religions, what are religions? Besides very, tight groups of people, it's people who share the same way of thinking, the same beliefs and the same values. And then they have rituals and behaviors that are aligned with those values, whether it is certain prayers that they do, times that they pray, fasting, holidays, all those rituals support that way of thinking. Well, that creates a bond. So if you and I think the same way, and if we behave the same way, that creates bond. So in a franchise system, the best franchisors work really hard to create a solidified culture, not just a good system with operations, but they bring franchisees together where there is collaboration, where there is communication, where there's certain expectations as to how we exchange ideas when we don't agree. In a healthy relationship, there's disagreement, but that disagreement is handled differently than it would be in a toxic relationship or a dysfunctional family. And as you know, you have some very functional franchise systems and some that are very dysfunctional. And a lot of it's because they put all their time into how to make cheeseburgers and not how to get along, right? So at the franchise level, I think it's very important that franchisors and franchisees come together to determine how they're going to be together. But then at the unit level, at the store level, at the franchisee level, they need to do the same thing with their employees. They can't just teach them to work. They have to teach them teamwork. They have to get them focused on the same goals, the same mission. They may not use the phrase mission statement, but to give them a sense of purpose and why we're here. We're not just selling cheeseburgers. We're helping energize people through the day, or whatever you want that mission to be, but it has to be meaningful. Edible arrangements, I said we're not in the fruit baskets business. We help people celebrate the important occasions in their lives. So I kept emphasizing the idea of celebration that impact the customer experience. So you want to get people having the same set of beliefs, the same focal points, and then you want to have rituals and behaviors that support that. So, we worked very hard to do that as well. That's what culture is. So you're not going to create a great culture by buying people pizza or giving them gift cards or having a holiday party. These are nice things, but that doesn't necessarily create a type of group relationship that you want. That's something you have to be much more deliberate about.
I often talk about franchising when people come to me and say, well, why franchising? And I said, one of the most beautiful things is you're not on an island by yourself, right? You're supported by a franchisor who's cheering you on because his royalties are based on your success. And you're supported by franchisees that usually want to share best practices and make sure you don't make the same mistakes they do. Would you kind of provide your thoughts on why a franchise or solopreneur or entrepreneurial that is kind of creating their own thing? So why franchise?
There are a number of advantages to buying into a franchise. And again, if I ever decide that I want to get back into owning my own business, much more likely than not, it would be a franchise. Number one, you can have all the things that come with being a business owner without having to have the idea. And what's great about that is, number one, you need to come up with it. Number two, someone else has tested it. Someone else has taken the risk. Someone else has done the marketing and the experimenting, and hopefully they've even created a brand. These are all the things that we evaluate when deciding if we want to buy into it. They've created all those things, figured out what works, what doesn't work. They've lost their money. They've made the mistakes. They figured out what's right. So we can then jump in. We don't need to invent the wheel in order to have a wheel that works. So let them do the inventing. So there's that. Then there is the ongoing support. And for the small royalty you pay, 5%, 7%, 10%, whatever it is, the value you get back in return is unparalleled compared to someone who is by themselves. And we saw this during the pandemic. Franchisors that are telling people how to get the PPP money, helping them cut costs, providing that emotional support, because again, that mindset piece is so important. The amount of support that you get from the franchisor, from fellow franchisees, that fellowship, it really has value that you're just not going to get that when you're out there on your own. When you're part of a franchise system, you're also part of a brand. So someone who's an experience, across town that's really great, when they see you, they say, oh, there's a location there. Now, hopefully it's a good brand, because the opposite can also be true, that poor performing franchisees can bring the brand down. But again, hopefully you vetted them before you buy in. But that brand, there could be marketing at a much larger scale compared to what you can do by yourself. So that's a really big thing as well. It creates more awareness out there, and there's more marketing opportunities. But here's one that a lot of people don't think of is your exit when you get out, right? If you're just Joe's Burgers and you're just one location, when the time comes for you to exit, the time comes for you to sell, okay, it might have a certain value to people who know you. But if you own, a well-known burger chain, of course, there's many of them, with a lot of people who are interested in buying a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Jack in the Box, or whatever, that's going to have a lot more value because people want to buy into the brand. And especially if it's a brand where there's not as many locations available to open or to buy. So there's some franchise brands who I've worked with who they target mom and pops. I worked with Poolworks, great franchise system. Some of their franchisees are people who've already been in the pool business or had pool supply stores and realized if they can get a lot more support and they can sell their business for a lot more money if they're rebranded as a Poolworks and they're part of the system. So when you're in a franchise system, it makes it easier for you to exit because you have more of a well-known brand, and even people in the franchise system who will help you with that transition and perhaps even help you find a buyer. So there's so many advantages to buying into a franchise system. I would just, if people have that right kind of mindset for business ownership, but don't have an idea, I think a franchise is such a great way to go. And people like yourself who can really help people match them with the right opportunities and explain these things to them. Again, you're not necessarily going to get that kind of support when you're out there trying to open a business or just going to a broker to buy some individual business. So much better buying into a franchise, and to get there by using someone like yourself who can educate people through the process.
Well, thank you for that, Scott. I have one other thing I'd like to cover with you. And it came, I was watching your TED Talk on pain on the path to resilience. And you talked about red zones and green zones. And you talked about highs and lows. And, congratulations for being a cancer survivor. It's just tremendous. I'm sure you've seen a lot of highs and lows as you have, quite frankly, opened up and transparently shared with your audience. And I applaud you for that. The one thing I always wrestle with people in a good way is fear, right? When you're going through uncertainty and you're leaving structure and diving into ambiguity, fears start to appear. And have you ever talked about fear and what you see in a potential franchisee or franchisee's eyes and how they deal with the fear in front of them?
Fear is a huge problem. I mean, in so many ways, but certainly in franchising. I mean, because it's your job to support people who are interested in franchising, but it's only a small fraction who have the courage to pull the trigger and actually go for it. I don't do what you do, but even over the years, I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me and said, yeah, I've always been interested and, I want to learn more. And I share what I know. I'll refer them to people like you. And most of those people don't have the guts. They don't have the grit to do it because there's some kind of fear, something holding them back. And I think fear, it does serve a purpose. It gives us pause, but I don't think it should freeze us. I think it should give us pause so we can ask the important questions. But I think we should make decisions not based on just on feelings, but on data as much as possible. Now, you're never going to have enough data that says 100% absolutely do this. There is zero risk. That's never going to be there. At some point, you need to feel that fear, but then go for it anyway. And that's what courage is. It doesn't mean you're fearless. It means you do have fear, but you go for it anyway. And anyone who's ever opened a franchise or expanded the franchise or hired an employee, agreed to maybe an expensive marketing campaign, they felt hesitation, maybe a little bit of doubt, but they went with the data and said, you know what, I'm going for it. And they reap the benefits of it. And so I think that it is okay to have some fear until the fear stops you from doing something that the data suggests that you should. So it's not just the fear of buying into a franchise. It's once it's there. Well, there's, do people always say, well, I want to wait till I have enough money before I hire an assistant manager? Well, maybe if you hire the assistant manager, that'll put things in motion to increase sales. Maybe if you go ahead and spend the money on marketing, then the sales will be there to justify it. At some point, you have to take some risk. You need a certain amount of courage. So it's okay to have the fear as long as it's not stopping you from making smart business decisions.
That's excellent. That's excellent. One thing I always share with my candidates, because I transitioned out of executive role at Ford Motor Company for many years, my fear was not in my control. My fear was under the people who paid my salary or created my path to my next career opportunity. I found that as a entrepreneur, franchisee, that fear was something I controlled. And it was a beautiful thing. Because like Dale Carnegie taught us, right? If you have worry, replace it with action. And if you have fear as an entrepreneur, what do? You go fix it.
Right.
So thank you.
I lack that quality. Like
I'm sorry.
I myself lack that quality that you have. Like for me, I don't feel that I can control my fear, but I can control my action. So for me, what works for me is I don't say stop being afraid. It's like just acknowledge the fear, but then go for it anyway. Right? Just go ahead and ask that girl to the prom, even though she's probably going to say no. Just go for it. And even when you're failing, when she says no, you still feel like, well, at least I tried. And it's surprising how often you get the yes, or how often things work out. So if you are able to control the fear, then God bless you and lean into that. But if you're like me and you can't, just feel it, but then go for it anyway. And then that's when you become unstoppable. I love the word that you use in your branding of empowered. And I think that's what it means, that we all have to tap into our power. And just because you have fear, it doesn't mean you're not still powerful, but you want that power to drive you and not the fear that might be holding you back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for getting to the essence of my brand for me. I really appreciate that. Well, I can't thank you enough for giving me some of your valuable time today, Scott. I've really appreciated it. I look forward to your next book. I don't know what the title is going to be, but I get the essence of it from what you described. So hopefully you will join me when you bring out your next book. I'd love to have you back. Any parting words of wisdoms you'd like to share with myself or the team, or candidates who are potentially looking to become a franchisee and be their own boss?
If I were to do it all over again, I said that I would have done it sooner. I would have worked with someone like yourself, someone who would have held my hand, done the research for me, already had the answers to questions that I had to seek out. I love franchising. I endorse it. I believe in it. I would encourage my kids to do it if they were so inclined when the time came. But I do think that working with someone like yourself who can help save people time and guide them and get their backs, I think it's a smart way to go. So it's an honor for me to be here with you, knowing that you're out there doing great things. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here and share a little bit about myself and my book. And I wish you well, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks. You too.